Hey, Elise Pickett here with the Urban Harvest, and today we are going to be talking about 7 tropical fruit trees that are awesome to grow here in Florida. Having an annual vegetable garden is obviously super important, something that I definitely do. If you're new to the channel, I teach vegetable gardening to beginner gardeners here in Florida. But today we are actually going to be talking about mixing in a little bit of that sweetness, and we're talking about Florida fruit trees. I'm going to be going over 7 different fruit trees that are great for backyards, small spaces, and also quick production. So all of the trees and fruit that we're going to be talking about today should produce for you within 1-2 years at absolute max. But as a caveat, it will depend on the size. If you're planting from seed, obviously going to take a little bit longer. But if you're going to a nursery and selecting a 2 to 4 foot tree, most of these will start producing for you within the first 1 to 2 years. As another caveat, it also does depend on your growing conditions. If they are in ideal growing conditions, if they have the right light and water and nutrients, that is when you are going to achieve the quick results. If they are growing in less ideal conditions, it may take a little bit longer to fruit. So let's get started. Our first tree to discuss is the mulberry, and it is an absolute no-brainer. In my opinion, everybody should have a mulberry planted. They are typically going to produce most of their crop in spring, but they do have a secondary crop in fall at times, and there's also ever-bearing varieties. The berries, if you haven't enjoyed them before, taste pretty similar to blackberries, maybe a little bit less sweet. They're absolutely delicious, and they yield so quickly for you. You'll usually get a crop within a year. Absolute max is 2 years, and you also have the added bonus of being able to eat the leaves. Our second tree is a banana, which actually technically isn't a tree. It's a grass, but we won't even get there. There are thousands of different varieties of bananas. Some dwarf, some full grown. They can reach up to 15 feet at times, but they are incredibly easy to grow here in Florida. They do well across the entire state, and they produce for you typically within the first year. Now they're non-seasonal, so it's not going to be a spring crop or a fall crop. They can fruit at any point during the year depending on the growing conditions for that plant, and the yields are also going to vary depending on how happy it is. I just harvested a rack of bananas that had 181 bananas and came in at over 21 pounds worth of fruit. But you can also have much smaller racks, so conditions mean a lot with the yields you'll see off your banana trees. The third fruit tree that I recommend growing for Florida is the Jamaican Cherry. In my opinion, highly underplanted. It is incredibly productive. They can grow into large trees, but they can also be pruned to stay small. So there's really no reason not to plant one. You have fruit nearly year-round. They slow down a little bit in our coldest months in the winter, but you have something where you can go out and pick a handful of fruit off every single day, typically within the first year of planting. Incredibly, incredibly productive plants. They taste a little bit like jelly. We have a peanut butter tree and the Jamaican cherry, and we'll put it together, and we call it a peanut butter and jelly sandwich for my daughter. But very sweet, very flavorful. The only downside is the fruit don't keep very well, so it's not really something that you can freeze or store away very well. But for a fresh fruit snack right out of the garden, the Jamaican cherry is a great way to go. All right, number 4 for tropical fruit trees in Florida is the citrus. We used to be the citrus capital of the country, and we have had some problems. There's citrus greening. It's a very real thing, and it is still greatly affecting our crops. Citrus trees used to grow for 20, 30, sometimes up to 40 years, and nowadays you're lucky to get peak production for 5 to 10 years, if you're lucky. I now treat them not as an annual by any means, but as a short-lived perennial. So I typically plant mine in pots, and they will still produce for you. They're just not going to have the lifespan that they used to be capable of achieving here in Florida. Obviously, we all know our citrus and we love it well. I don't need to describe the taste of a lemon or a grapefruit to you. Needless to say, they are very productive here still in Florida. They're just not going to be as long-lived as they used to be. The fifth fruit tree that I want to share with you is a little lesser known. It is the Jujube, or Chinese date, and I am absolutely thrilled with it. It is fruiting just a year after planting. It is loaded. Super excited for our first harvest. But you'll get typically anywhere from 40 to 100 pounds per tree once it reaches maturity at 2 years or so. Until then, you will be getting a significant crop and yield still. They'll typically fruit in the springtime, but you can have a secondary crop, especially if you're further south in the state. And they taste a little bit like apples, crisp apples, if they're picked fresh. You can also allow them to stay on the tree, and when they get kind of shriveled and wrinkly, you can harvest them at the dry stage and keep them shelf stable in a pantry or whatnot, and use them as a date alternative for smoothies or baking or anything like that. So very versatile, fresh or dry, lots of uses and tremendous yields on a very small, compact tree. One word of caution though, there are thorns and they will grab you. So if you are in a small urban setting and you're working on like an urban homestead, this may or may not actually fit into your landscape. But if you do have an area where the kids aren't playing or something like that, it is a beautiful tree to plant in your yard. This is number 6, and it is a Barbados Cherry. This I would almost call more of like a shrub than a tree. They can reach about 6 to 8 feet, maybe 10 feet in really good growing conditions, but this is something that can easily be tucked away and worked into your landscape, even if you're working in super small quarters. I like to call this growing your vitamins. It has more vitamin C in a single berry than your daily dose of vitamin C. So why not plant your vitamins? They're very tart, but not overly so. Like, it's not pucker your mouth, you can't eat it. They are still enjoyable, and they have just a touch of sweet to them, especially when they're picked nice and red and ripe. You're not going to get a ton of production, and it's incredibly variable depending on how much sun and stuff it's getting. You might just get a berry or two, or you might be able to harvest a handful a day. Last up on the list, number 7 for tropical fruit trees in Florida is actually not a tree at all. It is blueberries, and they are bushes, but it is such a no-brainer and easy to grow fruit that you have to plant at least a couple. There are early, mid, and late season plants, and I would suggest getting a variety of them to cross-pollinate and to extend your season, because it is a relatively short season. We're looking at about March to May, 2-3 months worth of production, so pretty brief, but they are absolutely delicious. I don't know who hasn't at least tasted a blueberry, but you're going to be getting about 2 to 5 pounds per plant within the first year or two. So in my opinion, pretty significant and easy to grow, and just so much fun for the kids to be able to walk out and pick, or for yourself.
Yeah,
Do you,
I see. Way down.
is it ready to pick? What do you think?
Yeah!
So only pick the blue one. Go ahead, you can eat it. This list of tropical fruit trees to grow in Florida is not by any means supposed to be all there is or all inclusive. These are just varieties of trees or types of fruit that I have found to work well in small spaces, to produce quickly, and to produce over a long period of time. There are hundreds of different trees and varieties of those trees that you can plant in your Florida landscape. These are just a few that I feel are worth highlighting. So we just covered 7 amazing tropical fruit trees to grow in Florida. Hopefully you guys can delve in, research them a little more, and see if they fit into your landscape. All of these I talked about are perennial, which means they are going to grow for you and produce for you for years to come. It is super fun to be able to grow watermelon or strawberries for a little sweet treat in the garden, but these trees will reward you for years to come. If you found this video insightful or helpful, make sure to head on down below and subscribe to the channel so you're alerted every time a new video comes out on Florida homesteading and Florida vegetable gardening. Have a great day.